Rundown coming to you guys live. Pulse of the Hawks edition is back. Man, it feels like we kind of got out of whack there for a minute because there was that big announcement show, and then just feels like we haven't done it in a while. But man, what a time to get Pulse back going because we have some hot topics that some of my favorite DK. We're going to talk about Geno. The DK rumors are just, I feel like that's just a year-round thing, but it really started to heat up. Trade rumors going around DK Metcalf. So we're going to get into all that. Geno Smith extension questions. We're breaking it down with Mookie, and it's almost free agency time. So we are really going to dive in hard and, take a look at some free agents that hopefully John Schneider is targeting and would be a nice fit here in Seattle, and retaining a couple of our own guys. So we're going to break that down with Mookie Alexander and the rest of us coming up here. And guys, if you are new to the channel and you haven't subbed yet, go down, hit the sub button, and sub to the channel. Like the videos, share the videos, all that stuff. And everybody that has been doing that, we much appreciate it. And guys, make sure you get your comments and questions in here. Get your super chats going. We are prioritizing those. We will answer those for sure, but just flood the comments, questions, ask us anything you want, because we're gonna have some fun with this show tonight. So on the other side, Mookie Alexander, Pulse of the Hawks.
So y'all can sit here and ask me all the questions y'all want to.
Don't you ever talk about me.
Yeah, let's go. It's go time, baby.
Here comes Geno, steps up, takes that shot to the end zone. It is Metcalf.
I'm just about that action, boss.
You about to go get it. You just like to do it.
That's what it is.
Off me.
Nobody in the world can do it.
Are you kidding me? Trying to do that. Pass is caught back in. Jackson Smith is jigged on the surface. Music moves in. Throw it forward. Oh my goodness, he caught it.
This is the Hawk Zone Rundown with your hosts, Ryan and Bryce.
Guys, welcome back to the Hawks Zone. We are live, guys. Get your questions, comments, flood them. Pulse of the Hawks segment. We're here with Mookie Alexander from FieldGulls. Mookie, what's going on, man?
Not much, fellas. This is our first show together since both of you and Hawks Zone Rundown podcast joined the FieldGulls team. We got a lot to get to, certainly over the next hour and change, and we've got so many important things coming up over the next several days that may even require an emergency pod, whether it's the Geno decision, anything that happens with DK, any cap casualties, etc. It's so intense that I've lost almost all my hair.
Hey, man, it looks good. Look, I'm pretty sure there might be a couple emergency pods coming up in between, our next one. But it's such a fun time of the year. The combine ended, like as you call it, the underwear Olympics. We're going to get into a bit of that too. But let's kick it off right now, because the big stuff that's been swirling around and funneled into the combine is my guy, your guys, DK Metcalf trade rumors, man. Were they swirling hard? I always feel like Mookie, DK's he's such a national guy, right? Love him or hate him. Even with our own fan base, there's people that love him, people that, I don't know about him. Even though he's been so productive, feels like there's always trade rumors going on, but this was really going hard. And there was the one big rumor was heading to Green Bay. But what's your take on the rumors? What do you think? How likely are they to be a reality at this point now, since combine's over? We've seen a couple of moves, Deebo Samuel, the likes like that. So what's your takeaway from the DK trade rumors so far?
Well, I think it should be made clear that based on Corbin Smith's reporting, that this is not a case of the Seahawks actively shopping DK. They're not putting him on the block. This is a case of Green Bay reportedly being interested and taking, asking the Seahawks, hey, if DK were available, hypothetically, what would it take? And I know that's one of the Packers beat reporters for The Athletic said there's no truth to this, whatever. We're at the peak rumor season right now. So I know there are going to be conflicting sources pretty much all the time, especially when it's combine week. But if you look at it logically, DK is on the final year of his existing deal. And the Packers and a couple other teams need wide receivers. Metcalf is in the prime of his career in terms of his age. He's going to be, 28 this year or 27? Well, whatever the case, he's in his late 20s. So wouldn't it be sensible for some teams to inquire about receivers who could be available on expiring contracts like Metcalf? So I have reason to believe that the rumors are actually reality and that the Packers have expressed interest in acquiring Metcalf. And doesn't mean the Seahawks are going to deal him. I don't think they will deal him, but it's one of those cases where if the offer is too good to pass up, then you have a more difficult decision to make regarding the money. Do you want to extend DK at $30 million a year? Do you think he's a $30 million a year receiver, even with the expanded salary cap? Or do you want to take one of these Packers receivers, which would be basically Dobbs or Wicks, because Christian Watson gets injured all the time. So one of Dobbs or Wicks, their first rounder, and just you have 2 firsts to play with now. I wouldn't really do that trade, but it's a case, where it's cost. Do you think that Dobbs or Wicks could be like a more, a long-term picture for the Seahawks offense as younger receivers on cheaper deals at the moment? But yeah, certainly interesting time, because this is kind of like as much as we've seen the rumors swirl regarding DK, because like in years past, it would be like, yeah, he's not for sale. He's not for trade. But this time around, most likely not being traded, but the door's not shut.
It's funny, Mookie, because when I look at this, I kind of look at it similarly in some respects to when Russ was in his contract year and John Schneider and them kind of let it leak out that the Browns potentially were interested and Seattle was interested in trading for the number 1 pick, and all of a sudden the Russell contract came to flourish in that offseason. To me, I think it's just that ongoing thing. Like you said, if the offer is too good to pass up, then there needs to be conversations had about it. Like, is it a realistic thing? Someone has actually met what we were potentially looking for to get DK. Do we trade DK? Is the likelihood of an extension with him possible? I think this is where that is kind of coming in is, okay, DK, these are kind of the teams that are looking at you if we're going to trade you. Do you want to go to a Green Bay? Would you want to go to a New England or, some of these places that have inquired? And I think it's DK realizing, well, maybe I want to stay in Seattle. Maybe I'll take a couple million less to stay in Seattle because I'm comfortable here. I'm loved here, so on and so forth. I agree. I don't think DK gets traded. I just, again, from what I've heard, who I've talked to, Seattle hasn't, like you said, openly shopped him. It's been teams that have come to Seattle and said, hey, would you be willing to if we offered this, this, and this? And according to what I've also heard is nobody has really met what Seattle's kind of got in their mind for DK. So, no, I think it's an interesting thing, and this is what happens with the combine. Things start swirling and rumors start going, left, right, and center. So, yeah, I don't know, Ryan, how would you feel if DK and this came to fruition for you?
I mean, I just think with where this team is set up, and you won 10 games, this division is really for the taking. And I really feel like, we can go back and forth, but I really feel like John Schneider thinks this team can compete. You're going to be in the wild card mix. And really this division's for anyone's taking. So I think if and Clint Kubiak, you look at that. So I just don't think he's going anywhere either. And I think that I just wouldn't like shipping him out this door, because even if you got a Dobbs back and a first round pick, I mean, yeah, you have to really think about that. But I just think where you're at right now, he's going to be such a centerpiece of this offense. Why take that away? Why make all of a sudden JSN you're our number 1 guy now? He's a mismatch, right? Whether you want to, whatever people want to say about him, he's been productive. The stats show it. He's everything I love, and he's got that dog in him too. The guy's an ultra competitor, and he wants to win. So I want to see him here. If there was a place though that he did go to, Green Bay, because if he goes somewhere, I want to see the guy be in a spot where he would be. I don't want to see him going to New England. I don't want to see him going to the Raiders, because even with Pete there, everyone that goes to the Raiders, it just seems like it's just no. It's not a place you want to go. Green Bay with Jordan Love and a couple of those young receivers would be exciting. I just think that would be a weapon Jordan Love would just be salivating over. So, yeah. But again, there's a reason for that, because I do think he is your number 1 guy. I think he's got The ceiling isn't there yet. And I'm excited to see what he can do under this Kubiak system. And especially, and we're going to get into it later, if we, shore up this offensive line a little bit, which I got more confidence going this year with some of the new coaching and John's focus. So, yeah.
It'll be interesting for me too, because you think of if this does become more of a conversational piece and we get closer to it and they get closer to making a decision, it's going to be interesting within this next week, and we'll talk on a little bit later, is does this all of a sudden become a Tyler and DK depleted receiving core where they're no longer here and we're only dealing with JSN and Jake Bobo and the Cody Whites of the world? Like, that's where for me, like when they talked about the receiver that could come back in the DK trade, I was like, yeah, I'd rather do something where we're taking that, like, hey, okay, this is a 3-way trade now, and we're giving this here, and hey, New York, we know Garrett Wilson's kind of disgruntled. You're sending us Garrett Wilson because we're going to take your first, and New York's agreed to get an extra first because we're going to go get Garrett Wilson. Like, that's the young receiver I want coming back. I don't want someone like a Romeo Dobbs, who we know has injuries. Like, yeah, he's okay, but he's not anywhere near the same caliber. At least with Garrett Wilson, we know he can be a top level receiver at points and more upside to him. So that would be the way I would see it if we're going to get a young receiver coming back.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Jaden Reed would probably be a more coveted receiver to me than Dobbs.
Yes.
Now, Dobbs is a good above the rim option. But frankly, and this includes Metcalf, Seattle doesn't have enough guys who can win at the top. And Metcalf is really, really good at certain things. Like, he's still Seattle's best deep ball threat. He is their fastest receiver still. It's just that Geno didn't have a lot of time to find him downfield. But he can take the top off of defense in ways that the other receivers on this roster can't, or no longer can in the case of Tyler Lockett. But if you move on from Metcalf and move on from Lockett, you got problems, because now you've created a significant draft need, even if you get a receiver back from Green Bay. So at the very least, you're drafting a receiver this year because of the expectation that Lockett is going to be released as a cap casualty. And just talking about general pass catchers, like, there's a good chance that Noah Fant's also going to get cut. So now you're looking at, all right, now you're down your top tight end, and maybe you can just promote Barner up, but tight end could still be a need, especially with Farrell Brown as a free agent. And you're going to need another wide receiver to bolster the depth, because JSN has taken that next step. But what's going to happen when he commands a lot more tension without a Metcalf opposite him? Yep. So Seattle's got to play their cards real wisely here as far as how they retool this receiving core. Now, I'm not against them retooling this receiving core just on principle, because I think, as I said, there's a speed element that's lacking outside of Metcalf, and they don't have enough guys who can win jump balls, contested catches one-on-one. Their metrics are terrible at it. But if you move on from Metcalf and you make this blockbuster trade, it gets real dicey as far as Geno having chemistry with a new receiver and just trusting the non-JSN guys. Because, sorry, folks, Jake Bobo might deserve more targets as like a red zone threat, but there's a reason he gets like 1 or 2 targets a game at most, is he does not consistently get open. And there's only so much scheming you can do for guys like Jake Bobo before they just top out. Like, he's efficient where he is at wide receiver 3 or wide receiver 4. It's sort of like in baseball. If a guy has a couple of nice hits and at the bottom of the rotation, you don't move him up to lead off. So that's kind of how I feel about Seattle's receiving situation.
What do you think it would take for you to, entertain it? You look at, I know he's had some injuries and stuff like that, but you look at Debo just departing San Francisco for 5th rounder. Do you think that has any effect on what the trade value could be for DK now that teams kind of look at that? If you're Green Bay, say, listen, Washington just got a guy like Debo for a 5th rounder. Why would we even consider a 1st rounder?
Well, Debo is also not a traditional wide receiver.
No.
And it's like he has like 900. I don't even think he has 1,000-yard receiving season to his name. He is, the versatility is the thing that makes him such a talented player. But that 2024 season was not good. His value tanked. Mm-hmm. And this was a sell low situation instead of 2 years ago when he was asking about his contract, and they could have traded him for a lot more draft capital. So the wide receiver market hasn't been like super, super hot the last couple of years. It's only like real upper echelon guys, of which I don't think Metcalf qualifies as a top 5, top 10 receiver, that are even in consideration for a first round pick. And then guys who are kind of up there in age, like Amari Cooper, they're not going for much. So I would be surprised if a team just really went all in to take Metcalf and give up a first rounder and a player, or multiple picks, because that's just not how the market has worked out over the last couple of seasons. We've seen receiver movement, but that doesn't mean we're seeing like first rounders just being given away so easily.
Yeah, no, it'll be interesting to see how this, all kind of shapes up over the next couple of weeks here, especially with this week coming up here for Seattle. We're going to find out a few things, I'm sure. And one of those things I think is going to be Geno Smith's future. And we heard from, John Schneider, Mike McDonald at the Combine, Mookie, that Geno's very much a part of what they want to do going forward here. If Geno gets an extension this offseason, does that lock him in as a longer-term situation? So is this going to be we're going with Geno for the next 3 years no matter what, even if we draft somebody? Or do you think, Mookie, it'll be more of a, hey, it's a 3-year, but really we have an out every year if we find somebody that we like more?
So what I can envision, and Curtis Allen kind of mentioned this morning, funnily enough, he quote tweeted a thing from Schefter last 2 years ago when Geno got his previous extension. And I thought, bleary-eyed Monday morning, like, oh my God, they announced the deal already? But no, that hasn't happened. I'm sure negotiations are still ongoing. But what I can envision is Geno getting an extension, like 3 years, 140 some odd million, and everybody's freaking like, oh my God, almost 50 million a year for Geno. And then over the cap comes post the contract numbers. And this is more like 3 and 105 or 110, and there's a lot of money that can be earned through incentives or whatever, and there's a lot of money up front. Yeah, it's kind of like a 1 year or 2 year max deal. There's no way around it. Geno being 34 is 34 is 34, and the number of quarterbacks who are real high level in their late 30s, very, very small, and usually they're like Hall of Famers or borderline Hall of Famers. So Geno, as good a story as he's been, he doesn't qualify. He doesn't hit that criteria. He would be an outlier among outliers in that respect. So I think they will extend Geno unless Geno and his agent, they just completely price themselves out. I don't think there's going to be this enormous trade market for Geno Smith, given his age and the fact that even though the metrics, when you peel them back, Geno had a better season than the 21 touchdowns and 15 interceptions suggested, it still doesn't look great. No. Just on the surface. So I think that the move that the Seahawks will make is to keep Geno, but they're going to make an attempt at a succession plan. Draft a quarterback this year, finally. And you have to keep in mind that Howell's going to be a free agent at the end of 2025. There's hardly any luck for Sam Howell to even still be on the team. Let's be real here. Yeah. And then 2026 is a much deeper draft class. When you're thinking on the assumption that Drew Allar, Garrett Nussmeier, who's the dude from Florida, DJ Lagway. So just those three. I'm sure there are a couple others that I'm missing, but that's a much deeper draft class in theory than this one. So if you take a swing, if you bunt for 2025, at least that's an attempt. But 2026 might be another attempt to land that franchise quarterback. It'd be foolish to try and just commit to Geno now and wait until the end of his deal to have a plan.
Oh yeah, I mean, I hope that doesn't happen because I think that was kind of what we were hoping that was going to happen even a couple of seasons ago, right? I mean, Geno was supposed to be this bridge, quote unquote bridge guy, and then I think we talked about it on a Pulse of the Hawks, like, well, how long is the bridge, right? Give us a definition of the bridge, right? Because I mean, there's a lot of bridges in the world, different lengths, right? And the thing is that now we're 3 years in, and people talk about it. And with all fairness to John Schneider, the way the draft fell, you could say, well, he didn't have the opportunities. If you're talking about, sure, if you want to pick up a Spencer Rattler or whatever, he's there. But if you want to get serious and say, well, look at even when they had the number 5 pick. There's a lot of people that thought they were going to take Anthony Richardson. So there was a guy maybe he would have took to say, hey, here's the succession plan. Or, and then last year, obviously, a lot of quarterbacks went early. Where we were sitting, because how we've been in the middle of the pack. It's hard to get there. So, we got a nice pick because of all the quarterbacks that went ahead of Murphy. But it's again, John didn't have. So there's a couple of years there where you didn't have that opportunity. So yeah, I see it. I see it more and more where this extension is just going to get done with outs, right? Where you're like, listen, we're not committing to you long term, and like we've talked about, maybe that 2-year mark, and but with the succession plan, I think we'd all be happy with that, right? Because like you mentioned, Mookie's 34. So yeah, you're 34, 35, 36. That's a pretty good number around there. Now you start bringing in the young guy to start taking over, because like you said, man, you're treading some deep waters there at past 36. And you got the camp that wants to say, well, he's not really 34, because he sat on the bench for 10 years. But man, we all know, dude, like Father Time's undefeated is not about how many hits you take. It is. But sometimes, hey, man, you just reach that number. Everybody reaches a number. I mean, you could take a guy that's been sitting on the couch for 20 years and get him up when he's 39, and he's not going to be running around like a 22-year-old. So, it's one of those things that that's what I want to see. I think it's good. I think we're all disappointed, especially with the amount of red zone picks. I think we all have to look at it like free agency's coming up. You get this extension done, then you focus on the O-line, and then you draft a young guy. And I think if we hit those three, I think we'd feel a lot more confident going in next year with Geno, with that young succession plan, and with hopefully hitting some free agent stuff. But we're going to get into this free agency in a bit. But yeah, so I think that's where I look at it. What about Bryce? What do you think?
It's interesting. I look at it and I go, I think there's strong conviction in that building, and from people I've talked to, there is, that they really do like Geno Smith, and Geno does want to be in Seattle. I think Geno also is more accepting of his role to an extent than maybe even when he did his first extension, where he understands, like, look, this organization truly is the only one that really believed in me outside of the Jets when they drafted me. Everyone else kind of passed me around, the Giants, the Chargers, and I got Seattle. Pete Carroll really instilled it, John Schneider. And the big thing for me is how John Schneider's talking now. Like Mike McDonald, even last year, kind of backed Geno. But we always were kind of the skeptic of John. Like, where is John in all of this? Like, does he really, we were talking about Drew Lock and all this kind of stuff. Listening to John talk at this press conference this year at the Combine about Geno, there's more conviction in John knowing how important Geno is. And I think maybe Mike McDonald's changed his view on Geno to an extent. And I think the other thing that's occurred, and this is the thing, the narrative, I think that really, you kind of could hear it, I think in Mike McDonald's Pro Football Talk Live interview he did, where Chris Sims said something along the lines of, well, everyone's blaming Geno because Geno's interceptions cost them the playoffs. And Mike McDonald literally said that is the wrong take. And he reset it like 3 or 4 times in that interview that was such a bad take. I look at it and I go, you're not drafting someone in this draft that's going to come in and compete to beat out Geno Smith day one, unless something unforeseen happens and, Geno just all of a sudden regresses. I just don't see it. I think this offense, out of all the ones he's been in, truly, and this is the thing, Geno's 2 best years came in a system similar to this with Shane Waldron. Kubiak knows the system better than Shane Waldron knew the system, and he grew up in it. He knows its inner workings. So we saw what Geno could do with Shane Waldron. Now he's going to have a better, in my opinion, better play caller, better just overall offensive staff in place. I think you're going to see a better Geno Smith. But at the same time, I think you can draft Geno's potential succession plan in this. And there's 2 guys, and we'll talk about it in the Combine takeaways. There's 2 guys to me that really stood out this weekend, I think, that are going to be guys that are going to be on Seattle's radar. One, I think some Seahawks fans will roll their eyes at, and another one that might intrigue them a little bit. The thing for me, I think this is going to be a couple-year deal. Like, it's going to be like, okay, we're going to lower the cap hit of this year. We're going to add 2 years to it. It's going to look like a new 3-year deal, but really it's a 2-year. And at some point, Seattle has outs in it. And that's what it's going to be. I think it's going to get done probably. I got a feeling they'll get it done Wednesday. After the franchise tag deadline tomorrow, I think there's a chance Wednesday or Thursday we hear Seattle's extended Geno, and we're going to hear about all the other stuff that they're going to have to do, whether it's Tyler Lockett, potential cut, Nwosu's extension maybe, or rework Draymond Jones. Like, there's going to be a lot of action in Seattle over the next few days here just to get them ready for free agency starting the following week.
Yeah, definitely. And let's face it, if they randomly decided we're going to move on from Geno Smith and cut, not trade. So highly unlikely Sam Howell is going to turn it around. He is probably like a below average starting quarterback / backup level. This dude's a 5th round pick. I mean, the hype I get from some of his biggest fans is a bit puzzling. Like he's a tough dude, and he's definitely indefatigable spirit, but capability is something that I question. But you look at the quarterback market for free agency, and I'm going to pretend Kirk Cousins is getting cut. Rodgers is pretty much already cut. He'll just get cut post June 1st. Rodgers ain't coming here. I wouldn't want Kirk Cousins because I feel like he is damaged goods physically, and there's no way around. And the fact that he just seemingly didn't disclose an injury to the Falcons, that's already got me a little bit irked. But then Sam Darnold, he's not going to get tagged by the Vikings. That just got reported. But there's a chance he stays in Minnesota.
Yes.
So you got to keep that in mind. And then everybody else is pretty much like a veteran or a reclamation project. So Zach Wilson, sorry, he's not good. Trey Lance, no, not good. Jacoby Brissett, veteran. Don't forget that time Jacoby Brissett was supposedly up for a 2nd-round pick from Seattle. Remember that report from years back? But wouldn't want him. Drew Lock's a free agent, but we don't have to relive that again Philadelphia is not on the schedule this year, so no need to sign Lock. And then Jarrett Stidham, Joe Flacco. So you're kind of left with Justin Fields, and I think Pittsburgh's going to re-sign Fields. And even if they don't, Fields, his track record as a passer is a lot different than his athletic abilities. Fields still takes a ton of sacks, and he's just always been inconsistent. So you're banking on basically turning a bad quarterback into a good quarterback again. And they don't happen frequently for a reason. I don't think guys just transform on the regular that much. So Fields, if he signs with Seattle, okay, fine, but I'm not expecting a whole lot. It's just not a great free agency class, even when you add in anybody who's going to get cut. Like Mac Jones, would anybody really be interested in Mac Jones? Like he is kind of who he is at this point. He's a limited passer. So Geno in 2025, and I stress only 2025, is their best option to compete for a division title, playoff spot, what have you. If they move on from Geno and want to go with a reclamation project and a rookie quarterback, that is a semi-admission that they're not really thinking that they're that close, and they're willing to eat it for a year if it means they have some intel on whether or not they have a franchise quarterback for the long term with one of the younger guys.
Yeah. No, for sure. And that's kind of what I think is kind of going to be the whole outcome of this, and the end run is you don't have a better option this year. If you want to compete, like if they go and turn around and trade DK, then is this going to be a situation where it's, okay, cool, we're going to trade DK, we're going to let Geno test the market and take those 2 steps back to reset it? I don't see that. Not the way that Mike McDonald and John Schneider were talking. They think they're only a few more pieces potentially away and some coaching up from getting a lot more out of this team. So, but let's pivot to the combine, Mookie. I don't know how much of that you actually got to watch, but who are some guys that stood out, like winners and losers? Who do you think, give me a couple guys that stood out for you and a couple guys do you think ended up hurting themselves?
Well, Gunnar Helm quite literally hurt himself. He sprained his ankle. That explained the very slow 40 time. I'm going, yeah, and if you weigh 240 and you're doing a 4.9 as a tight end, it's not looking good. But that explains a whole lot. And Gunnar Helm, bros, we might be back because I'm interested in him as like a 2nd tier or 3rd tier option as a draft pick target for Seattle. But Membu from Missouri, I feel like he did so well that he's probably not going to be there at 18. And keeping in mind, guards are not. He's listed as a tackle, but I think he would get moved to guard. They're not drafted as high as they used to be. Like the Quentin Nelsons are kind of the exception to the rule these days. But Membu looks like he could be the real deal, not just with this film, but also how he tested. I also think Shamar Stewart's not going to be available at 18 either. like that pass rushing option. The only question would be how people value his lack of sacks, or measure his lack of sacks, that lack of productivity, especially on a pretty deep defensive line on Texas A&M. And then somebody who really intrigues me is Nick Emenwari, South Carolina, because I just think about how Mike McDonald used Kyle Hamilton. And I'm not saying Emenwari is another Kyle Hamilton, but safety is so key to McDonald's scheme. And so similarly to Pete, but not identically with Earl and Cam, but with McDonald, you've got Julian Love. Kobe Bryant's on a contract here, so you got to keep that in mind. Rayshon Jenkins is available for trade. I bet you by the time this week is over, he's cut, because I don't think there's going to be much of a trade market for him. And then Kayvon Wallace is a free agent, and he didn't do enough to make me think he should be getting significant snaps. So Bryant is not necessarily somebody who's going to be your long-term future. He had a really good year, but that doesn't mean like a big extension's coming up. So Emenwari, he just killed it at the combine. That was athletically, he's great. He's got very good instincts on the field. So if Seattle goes defense and they go secondary, I feel like they would go safety over cornerback. So those are just some of the names of the earlier rounds, or projected earlier rounds, that stand out to me.
Yeah, for me, there was a couple guys that stood out. So Emenwari for sure. Like for me, I think he's going to be a really interesting potential Seahawk, just because you can move him around. He's got a bit more of the Cam Chancellor and but with the Kyle Hamilton athleticism. Another guy for me is Will Campbell. Watching him move and how he tested, but I think Will Campbell could potentially fall a little bit to Seattle maybe. And if he did, I think he's an all-pro level guard at the NFL level, not a tackle, a guard. And if he's there at 18, I think you run to the podium if you're Seattle and you graciously hand in that ticket and say, hey, yeah, I'm going to take a guy that's potentially going to come in and start for us right away. The other two guys that really did impress me outside at the receiver position, outside of Marcus Golden, was Jaden Higgins and Jalen Noel. They both from Iowa State like killed their testing. Like Higgins, especially with his size being 6'4", 215 plus, like he moves so smoothly. I think he's definitely made himself some money. And, for me, guys that I think struggled and maybe hurt themselves a little bit, I think Will Howard really hurt himself. Like he looked bad as a quarterback, and in some of the reps there, like I just was not impressed with Will Howard. And I'm thinking to myself, like, you sat out a Senior Bowl, you didn't do Shrine Bowl, and you come out and give that performance right away when guys that did do certain things came out and looked better, like a Riley Leonard looked better. Jackson Dart blew everybody away. The other guy I think that hurt himself was Shedeur Sanders. Him not doing anything, I think potentially has caused him to slide a bit more in the draft, because I think with what Dart did, I think there's a conversation now Dart is pushing Shedeur for QB2 in this draft class.
I'm not quite there yet. It would be interesting to see who does pro days and who doesn't, because that's kind of like the saving grace over the next few weeks, because we did have a lot of high profile players, because Cam Ward didn't do any deals, but he's kind of like consensus QB1 at this point. But Dart at the very least should be QB3. I mean, I was on the conference call with Daniel Jeremiah last week or week before, it was the week before last, and he had him as his QB3. He made the Jalen Hurts comparison, which I'm not entirely sure about that, but tell you what, Jackson Dart in his media availability, very thoughtful media availability that he had, some great answers. He said he really looks up, he tries to model his game after Hurts. I mean, he's got the mobility, he's got a very good arm, not to the Josh Allen type arm, but that's like 99th percentile arm we're talking about there. Yeah. So I feel like, and Ewers also looked all right. Now, again, we're doing these drills indoors with just QB and receiver combo, just basic agility stuff and other drills common to the position. So we have to marry that to the game tape, the whole shebang. But I do wonder about Ewers' injury history and how much that impacted his last season, because I feel like that hurt his stock. Seth Hennigan, whom FieldGulls had an interview with last week, I mean, if I'm talking like day 3 options, I thought he looked good. But I don't like to heavily base or form strong opinions off of people's combine day performances. Like even Will Howard, he was wayward accuracy, but we've seen him in a national championship game in live reps put up some clutch passes and make very good decisions. I just worry that he's not a great A+ athlete, so he's probably going to be somebody who ends up more likely day 3 than day 2. But again, these pro days over the next few weeks could have us changing our minds a bit.
Yeah, it's funny. Rob Staten. I know this is Mookie. We were talking about this before we came on, but like he's got Shador falling out of the first round. I mean, I think that's an unpopular opinion, but he just to Bryce's point, didn't participate and some of the other baggage that he might be carrying. I mean, obviously dealing with his dad, there's probably some teams they're gonna axe off the hop anyways, like do not draft me. But if he's slipping, he might get to a team that's better off anyways. But yeah, it's gonna be interesting, man. I'm still high on Dart. I mean, the hype is just gonna get bigger and bigger. It's gonna be interesting to see where he lands. Like not that they're a comparable quarterback, but just even last season when, man, we were talking Michael Penix, possibly. Like, remember we're like, oh yeah, you might be able to get Penix in the, I don't even know, we're talking like 3rd round, and then he hit then he hit his pro day, and it was just like, it's like there's people that never saw him play or something, and it was like, and then the hype got real, and then we're like, okay, well, we got to maybe take him at 16, and then he didn't even last in the top 10. So, man, you know how the quarterbacks go, right? I mean, I'd be surprised if Dart's not even here when we're picking at 18, right? Like, that's a guy I like. Now, the funny thing is we had Parker Blake, who deals O-line. We had that pod with him, and he was an awesome guest. This guy's an O-line guy and loves O-line, knows the importance of Seattle and getting it right. And he's even like, I would take Dart at 18. And I'm not saying to do it. I'm just saying there is that opinion out there that go get this kid. And if the Seahawks think highly of him, I mean, I don't know, man. I mean, it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world, but because like you said, you can wait for the next year, and I think that's what they might do. I don't think they're going to do that, but because I think you look ahead and say, why would we reach when let's just address and build this team up. But I don't know. What are your guys' thoughts? I mean, who overall, if the Seahawks were going to take a QB, if you don't take one on day 1, I mean, Bryce, I know you've thrown a couple of names out there. Mookie, which guy, if you wanted John to go up on the podium, at least get a guy in here, who would it be for you?
I'll try and warm myself up to Dart because I can't get that Florida game out of my head and some other games against tougher teams. But yeah. On his better days, he can be very, very productive. I mean, the bowl game against Duke kind of like reignited his draft interest, especially some of the downfield throws he made. I'm not going to give up on Will Howard just yet, just off of the combine performance, but I might slow my own roll there, especially since admittedly he was on a pretty stacked team filled with future NFL players as well. But Ewers, I'm hesitant on. I know Rob Staten is a bit higher on him than I am. I wouldn't really be interested in Riley Leonard. Jalen Milroe, incidentally, and Ryan and I were talking about this beforehand, before we went on the air, him not doing any tests, even the 40, I feel like he could have done that. Didn't mean he looked terrible at the drills or anything, but just showcasing and putting that athleticism on the relative athletic score, I think could have done wonders for a team that may see a very raw, unpolished quarterback who's got footwork issues, mechanics issues, and think, if I can clean those up, then Milroe could be a really good starting quarterback. So again, I don't think this is like 2022 where it was just a clearly bad quarterback class that Brock Purdy saved, but it might be kind of like in the middle. 2022's class was pretty weak. The 2024 class, he had 6 in the top 12, but then nobody else went until Rattler in the 5th. So that's kind of like somewhere in the middle is how I'm sensing it. One thing that I would say is that if they take Dart, he is the youngest quarterback in this class. And that is a pretty important point that even he made. So he said, I think, that he wouldn't mind sitting for a year. So he's if we go by the interviews, and I'm sure he might have relayed this information to teams in private, including Seattle. If he sits for a year, I don't think it would be the worst thing in the world for him. Right. But I think that Darts may end up being the most realistic option for Seattle at pick 50. If he's there at 18, then maybe Seattle takes him, but I don't think he's going to go all the way up to mid-first. There's still time to shake that out. But again, the number of players with first-round grades right now is not high based on what we've seen or what's been reported. So from like pick 16 all the way through pick 64, I mean, there could be a wide range of, hey, I thought that this guy had a low second-round grade. Well, the gap between 16 and 64 is just not there in the way that you would have in previous drafts. So, yeah, I think Darts is going to be the one gets most hype from among Seahawks fans for sure.
It's actually interesting. For me, there's a couple names that stand out more for the Seahawks because I believe Geno is coming back, and I think you can get some of your other holes filled before you have to take one. I think Quinn Ewers is climbing Seattle's board, and I think, from what I understand, I think he had conversations with John Schneider. I don't know if he had a formal interview there with Seattle or not, but he did talk to Seattle, someone from Seattle there. John reiterated a few times in his interviews connections are important to him. We know that. Who's working with Quinn Ewers right now for his draft prep is Mike McCarthy. And John holds Mike McCarthy in massive esteem. And I don't think that's something that should be lightly and not really looked at from Seattle's fans. I think that's a big thing. And for youth, we're talking Quinn Ewers will be 22. He'll still be one of the younger quarterbacks in this class with Jackson Dart, with 36 college starts, though. And I think his injuries did really affect him this year. And I think he's another guy that I listened to his interview. Very mature guy, very understanding of his situation. And I think he'd be the type of guy that would benefit from sitting from a year. And I think he'd be open to it as well. I really do like Tyler Shuck. I just wish he was 2 years younger. Like, that's my biggest thing with Tyler Shuck, and I'm still trying to get through, is the age factor, because, man, he looked so good. He might have been the best pure thrower there at the combine, but he's, if he gets on the field in 26 or 27, he'll be 27 and 28. Like, that clock's moving. And the other one that actually really surprised me and I think could be a fit day 3 for Seattle potentially is Brady Cook out of Missouri. He's someone that I've watched quite a bit on, and I think he's an interesting day 3 kind of take. I'd take him over like a guy like Riley Leonard. He's just as athletic, but I think he's a better passer, and he's got a bigger arm. And I think he, again, played in the SEC, played against a good level of competition. So he's definitely a guy I'd be interested in as well. But overall, like, from this combine, I think the one thing I heard, like you said, Mookie, is there's maybe only 10 guys that are truly first-round picks in this class. And then from pick like 10 on, you're picking guys that be going at like 35, 37 in any other draft class. Like, it's not a very strong draft class that way for blue chip, true first-round talents. It'll be interesting to see what Seattle does at 18 this year.
Yeah, because they've not traded down in a good while. And this might be, if there was ever a draft to think about trading down, especially since you've got picks in every round right now, once they dish out the comp picks, that's something that I wouldn't be shocked if Seattle did finally break that trend and go back to the old trend of trading down. I'm glad you mentioned Shuck because I forgot about him. And yeah, any team that drafts Tyler Shuck is starting him right away, or they're starting him in his second season. Because you want to know what happens if you start him in his third season, he'd be 28 years old. That's Brandon Whedon territory to be a virtual rookie. So, I mean, to me, somebody as old as Shuck, you got to find out if he's NFL caliber, like, sooner rather than later, because by the time he hits a contract extension, he's already a 30-year-old quarterback. So, I mean, he did look quite sharp, and I like that he, at Louisville, play action heavy offense, and he looked confident with his arm, and he's quite accurate. But I mean, when you're in college for as long as he's been and playing against 18 and 19-year-olds, I think at some point it's got to click for him. And he's also got an injury history that we have to acknowledge too. That's why he's been in college for so long. But yeah, Shuck's a name to watch. Brady Cook looked all right. Dylan Gabriel is a total non-starter for me. Like, not only below average like measurables, but like, he doesn't have a great arm. If you're going to be a shorter quarterback like Russell or like Kyler Murray or Bryce Young, you got to at least have the arm to make up for that. And Gabriel doesn't fit that at all.
Yeah. Hey, it's going to be interesting, man. Like you mentioned, I was talking to somebody about that, and I said, yeah, John Schneider just always trades back. And then I was like, wait a second. He didn't do it last season. He didn't do this draft before, and he didn't do it the Charles Cross draft. So actually, this is a different trend for him, right? You just think like Seahawks always trade out of the first round, but man, that hasn't happened the last 3 drafts. So, but I was thinking about that too. Like this could be the time. I mean, unless someone falls out, they just like, we got to take them. Like, like how Murphy fell in their lap last year, right? Because of all the quarterbacks got taken. But yeah, let's really quickly, man. Let's move over to some free agency. And then
big week.
Q&A's huge week, man. We always joke about it, but it is like Christmas, that first day of free agency, right? Like you just, man, do we get to run down the stairs and open up a big gift? Like that's sort of what we want to know, and again, Mookie, before we went on, we talked about it. Like, will John Schneider make a splash? And the focus is obviously, everyone's been talking about it since the beginning of the season, was O-line. And, you look at the past 2, well, just going back a couple of off seasons here, John Schneider has made a big splash, right? And he did it 2 years ago with Draymond. It didn't work out the way we all thought it might, and that's fine. But then he made a big splash re-signing Leonard. And I think that one sort of got overlooked a bit because you're like, well, he's already on the roster. You have to do it. And, but it's not as easy as that, right? Yes, he was on your roster, but he's a free agent. You still had to make a splash. He did that. So, with now Kubiak coming in, does he make a big splash? Mookie, what do you think? Do we go after this O-line and really answer some questions, a lot more questions, and then we don't have as many answers going into the draft and scrambling for O-line? What do you think? What do you think John's kind of gonna do here, free agency?
I think he's going to make a splash, but not a cannonball splash. It's going to be like a diver who's over rotated a bit and making that sort of splash where you get docked a little bit by the judges. But
right.
That's what I'm thinking, like a mid-level splash, nothing that's going to just create an absolute cascade effect there. And I feel like he has to, because they can't bargain hunt yet again on the offensive line. And when I mean bargain hunt, I don't mean signing, hey, this 25, 26-year-old is available for $4 million or $5 million a year and has got some potential. I mean, here's this aging veteran who's well into his 30s, who is probably on the decline. We're just going to do some patchwork stuff here and call it good after one season. No, those days got to be over. Like, whether it's the Tomlinson signing or like the Austin Blythe thing didn't work out. And I think he was pretty much 30 at the time. We had talked earlier, he wasn't aging, but Luke Jokel several years ago, like we know the disaster that was. But Drew Dalman is the big name. And from ESPN's intel, it seems like the Falcons are prepared to let him go or not re-sign him, but with the acknowledgement that he's likely going to command top dollar at the position. Now, Creed Humphrey is on a 4-year, $72 million deal. So $18 million a year for Creed, and that's long enough ago that it doesn't take into account the cap bumps that we keep getting. So would Seattle pay anywhere near $18 million or even $20 million a year for a starting center? I don't think so. So I'm not expecting them to go for Dalman. So if they sign a center, I think that they would look at, say, Josh Myers from Green Bay. Now, keeping in mind, his PFF grade, and we can take it for what it's worth. You can take it with a grain of salt. You can chew it away. I am of two minds when it comes to PFF and their grading system, especially at certain positions. But Josh seems to be kind of like the weaker link on Green Bay's offensive line. But he is still 26 years old, and the injury he had against the Packers evidently wasn't as bad as it seemed. So I think that they are going to sign a center. We also got to keep in mind that there are going to be guys on other teams getting cut over the next few days as cap casualties. So by the time we're done with this show, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday roll around, you might see some centers on the market who unexpectedly are on the chopping block. But yeah, there's also Liam Eichenberg from Miami, and he would be another option. No need for Evan Brown from Arizona. We already went through that. He's okay, but like he was a guard too for Arizona. I think Ryan Kelly would be an interesting splash-ish signing because he's 32. But again, he is up there in age, and I'm wondering, even with his positive reputation, if he's worth the long-term signing. Guard to me is interesting because I feel like if they wanted to make some noise with somebody young and with potential still, Tevin Jenkins from Chicago could be that option, and more focus on left guard, just replacing Tomlinson. Because right guard, I think it could be one of Haynes, Lomea, or whomever else, a draft pick, what have you. But left guard, I think having somebody really good or with the potential to be really good next to Charles Cross would do wonders for this offensive line. So I'm not expecting a huge, stop the presses, $15-20 million a year contract, but something in the 10 million range, 12 million a year range. I don't think that would be outrageous. And by Schneider standards, that would be breaking the bank a little, but it's, to me, justified.
Yeah, no, I think they're going to make some sort of move on the O-line. I don't think they'll rely solely on the draft, and I don't think it'll be a situation where they will go bargain shopping for the O-line. The other name that I'd be interested in, Drew Dahlman's one for sure that I'd love to see Seattle sign, but if they were to go after a guard, Will Fries out of Indianapolis is somebody that I would be interested in. I know he might cost a bit more, but younger player, shows lots of potential. Yes, he's coming off an injury, so you might be able to get him a little bit at a discount just because of that, but nothing substantial. He'd be a guy that I think would be a splash signing, but not a cannonball, but more of a, I jumped into the shallow end of the pool and created a bit of a wave. The thing that'll be interesting too for Seattle in this week is who are you letting go of? And, how are you going to, when does Ernest Jones' contract come out? When does Geno's contract extension, or what are they doing with Nwosu? Because they push back that. What goes on with Tyler? Like, those are all things between now and Monday that need to be decided.
Yeah, and I anticipate that they would move on from Tyler. They might cut Fance plural, like Noah and George. So I think I mentioned Rayshawn already. So there are a lot of moves they can make. Even Robertson Harris, I think, could be somebody who gets let go. I mean, there's the Jaron Reed question and whether or not they keep him, because I could see that they still need to invest in the trenches on the defensive line too. But Reed was so good last year, unexpectedly so to me, that I'm wondering if McDonald wants to keep him. And based on the press conference quotes, I think they do. But yeah, the splash move, I think, would have to be, to me, in the trenches. Like they already tried to do that in the trenches stuff with Draymond, and it didn't work out. But I wouldn't give up on that just because. Like there could be options on the interior defensive line too. And they're going to be cap casualties again. I mean, they could go with another Denver guy and DJ Jones, who I liked in San Francisco and be in Denver, but nothing like huge on the defensive line, like just a space eater, somebody who can plug the run effectively and provide moderately good interior pass rush. I'm cool with that. But when we say trenches, like I think the offensive line, we're good with the tackles, the guards and the center. That's the key. And if you notice, all the official meetings that they had, or at least the reported formal meetings that they had based on Hawk Bloggers reporting, almost every single one of them is a guard or a center or a tackle who's likely to be converted to guard. So yeah. I think just the context clues there tells you that they are serious about wanting to improve this interior offensive line significantly.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I just think at least get one guy, but I think center is going to be the top priority. And then, you talk about the other side of the ball in the trenches. I mean, I think it's likely that they get a deal done with Chenna too, just because I think, you want to see a healthy Chenna in this system and just, see what he can do with Mike still. I don't think they want to give up on him yet. And I just think they still need somebody that if they think that Chenna can really, be a different maker if he's, a full season healthy, because, Maffei's solid, Hall's solid. You need, depth and just another baller out there. So I think you could see that. I mean, yeah, so I'm on board with all that. I think it's O-line. But we got some nice development pieces here, like you mentioned too, on that other side guard position. So I think it's going to be, let's address it how we can. Drew Dahlman would be on the top of my list, and you mentioned Ryan Kelly, another guy. He's older, but if you miss out there, then maybe he's another option. But yeah, Bryce, you want to get into some? We got a few Q&As. Let's start with super chat here from. Oh, that
It
went away.
disappeared. Hold on a second. There we go.
Let's pull it
You
back
made
up.
Prince disappear. Oh no.
WD Ford, yeah. Today had a lot of shade for Shador, and even some YouTubers danced on his grave. Is there a consideration to dropping Sanders being the pick 18? I mean, like I mentioned earlier, man, Staten hasn't fallen out, but honestly, I'm gonna let you guys take this, but I don't really want him. I wouldn't want him sort of being the next face of the franchise for the Hawks at quarterback. But what's your guys' take? Plus, I mean, yeah, I do think it's possible he does fall to 18, maybe.
I think the falling is a possibility. I don't think he's a fit for Seattle and Mike McDonald. His demeanor is not that of something that I think is what Mike wants to build here. I think his skill set could fit for sure in Kubiak's system and everything and what he does. But I think it's are you prepared to also have the Dion part of that conversation be a part of ongoing things and that whole thing? Like if things don't go well, who's Dion putting on blast? Will it be John Schneider? Will it be the organization? Will it be the 12s? Who's he going to put on blast? Like there's a lot of stuff that comes with a Shador Sanders. And if Pete Carroll was still the head coach in Seattle, I think there's more of a conversation with this because Pete knew how to manage personalities. It's what he was one of the best things he was good at, like that he could do. That's why I think the Raiders are a real possibility for Shador now. I think him slipping to 6, I think he's a real possibility for them.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to drop to 18. There would have to be some other like more concerning stuff as far as him dropping out of the first round entirely, let alone being there at pick 18. And even if he is there at pick 18, I don't think he's really on Seattle's radar. It's funny because Shador gets these. One of the comparisons that was made before the start of last season, actually, the last college season, was that Shador has got a little bit of Geno Smith in him. You know, like not the best athlete in the world, but he's accurate. He's tough. He can make some plays with his legs, but he's not the most mobile quarterback out there. But I don't think that Shador is going to go to Seattle.
Yeah. Here's another one. We talked about it. Do y'all think Dart's going to go be drafted by the Hawks in the 3rd or 4th round? Another Quinn. I mean, that's obvious. No, he's a first rounder, I think. But yeah, Quinn, sure. We mentioned some quarterbacks earlier, but there's just no way. Maybe a few months ago you could have talked about Dart going there, or a couple months ago, but it's set in stone now.
Yeah, Ewers might end up in the 3rd or 4th. Dart, I don't think he's getting out of the 2nd. So I'm not quite there to think that he's going to be like if anybody's going to be a late first rounder, it might be him. But I don't think that he's going to be available in the 3rd or 4th round. After round 2, I think that's when you get the run on Ewers, Howard, maybe McCord ends up being a little bit later than Shuck. 50. Basically, there's going to be a little bit more of a spread from the first QB to the last one, as opposed to the weird cluster that we got last year, and then this humongous gap all the way to Spratler and Jordan Travis and so on.
All right, here's another one from C-Spun. Would any of you want the Seahawks to draft a running back in day 3? Any RB that may be suitable for, I'm thinking, K9?
Clint Kubiak.
Oh, Clint Kubiak. I was like looking for a second. I thought, yeah. Damian Martinez comes to mind for me. He's a guy that I think could be interesting. Taj Brooks is another one, or is it Taj Boyd from Texas Tech? I'm trying to remember. I think it's Taj Brooks. Yeah, he's another guy that would be interesting to me. Just the thing that will be interesting, I saw someone put it up here today because I know Michael Myers is now on, or Mayer, sorry, is now on the trade block for the Raiders, is I could see Seattle potentially maybe moving a running back to get a tight end if there isn't someone that they've fallen in love with in this class and get a young tight end still. I could see them potentially doing something like that and trading, like, say, a Zach Charbonnet to Pete Carroll, who likes that type of running back, and picking one in this draft class.
I can see them taking a running back. I mean, keeping in mind Walker, end of his deal, and he's not a first rounder, so there's no 5th-year option to discuss. And then Charbonnet has significantly improved toward the end of last season, so I'm sure most likely they'll just keep Walker and Charbonnet as the 1-2, and then you got Kenny Mack, who I think has firmly established himself as a 3rd-string running back, and he can at least be an RB2 in a pinch. I'd like to see more of Kenny McIntosh. after some of the carries that he got last year on a bad offensive line and a bad offense. If they do take a running back, then I like Damian Martinez. This is a deep running back class. So like Genty is the headliner, and then you got Amarian Hampton from North Carolina. You got Quinshon Judkins looked really, really good as well, and I suspect he'll be one of those early picks. There's somebody that I forget, RJ Harvey from what do you call it? Central Florida, I think is another one who stands out. But there'll be a very specific type of running back, especially in a zone scheme where they want somebody who can read the blocks properly and be able to fall forward consistently. Because I feel like even for Charbonnet's improvements, like not a lot of Seattle's running backs lately, post Chris Carson, have had that ability to head down, line of scrimmage, and fall forward for extra yardage.
Yeah. You're on mute, Bryce.
I am on mute. Sorry about that. MWM comes in with, not that the Hawks had a chance, but I'm disappointed Trey Smith got tagged. And T. Higgins hitting the open market to gauge a DK extension money in years. Yeah, both those guys getting franchise tag kind of inadvertently screwed the Hawks a little bit and figuring some value out, and also potentially going and getting themselves a top tier guard in Trey Smith. I didn't think Smith was a realistic option after a while for Seattle. I just didn't think John would do that kind of move, but it is what it is. Sounds like Jamar Chase, though, isn't too happy about not that he's not happy for T. Higgins, but that they're having that go out before working through his extension there, which actually leads to Ian Victor's one. What's up, guys? Here's a fantasy idea. DK to Cincinnati for Jamar Chase and pick swaps without anyone knowing until it's announced, like the Luka Doncic and Anthony Davis trade. Oh, God.
Yeah,
I mean, that's only if somebody has some like real tight relations with Cincinnati and Seattle, right? Like, like Nico and Pelinka with the Lakers, right? Like, what's going on here? So
I wish we can land Jamar Chase that way. I'm sure if we can get Nico Harrison into football and get him over to the Bengals side, I mean, the Bengals fans would absolutely lose their minds. But yeah, I would be 100% down for that if we could adjust things in a if we could turn the trade realism off, then that would be fantastic. But I mean, it's a great fantasy trade idea. It's just that the reality side of it is, it's not rooted in any reality, is it?
No, sadly, it's not. And I would love to see Jamar Chase in the neon green and blue, but I don't think that's a realistic option anytime soon.
But I mean, I'll go back and say this. So, like, yeah, I mean, he's a top guy. But you know what? I think if DK in Kubiak, I think he is absolutely salivating. I go back to what he's gotten out of Justin Jefferson, obviously arguably the top receiver in the league, but you talk about yards in a season, and then what he's done with Brock Purdy and that offense. And so that's what I'm excited about, because I know we talked about it last year. We're like, man, what's Ryan Grubb going to get out of DK? He's going to have a career year. Remember that? Career year for DK Metcalf. And, we all saw how badly Grubb, failed. And, but so Kubiak's got this track record that I'm excited about. If we improve this offensive line, then I think DK and this offense is going to just flow so much better that, he's just going to have more opportunity to really have that career year. So yeah, I don't know, man. I just got that, DK's our guy thing, so let's get this worked out. And when you think that extension would get done, you see that one a little later on, closer to kind of camp time.
I think that would be a closer to camp one.
Yeah. So if anybody's thinking, like, if anyone's listening to the show thinking, hey, we did Geno, we're free agency, like, what's going on with DK? I think, people got to realize, hey, that doesn't mean anything. Like, don't read into like, oh, well, maybe they're going to trade him now because the extension hasn't got done in April, So I think that's sort of just good to, let people sort of realize, hey, there's just sometimes timing with these things, right? Geno, obviously there's a certain timing thing here in March. And, so yeah, I think that could be a good time and point for that. So
here's our last one.
Okay.
Nick Holmquist comes in with, we need 3-0 linemen. Free agency ain't looking good. I don't know if I totally agree with that. I think there's some guys in free agency that can be had that would be benefits and upgrades for Seattle. I don't think it's the deepest free agency class we've ever seen, but I think there's still pieces in there that are worth getting and potentially adding to this roster to upgrade it.
3 O-linemen from free agency or 3 O-linemen combined from free agency and the draft is my question back to that. Because if it's 3 O-linemen in free agency, that is like the opposite of a ringing endorsement for the draft picks you already have.
Yeah.
So I still think you can get one notable guy in free agency who's ready to start, and then still develop some guys at the draft in the long term. I mean, you still have, as mentioned earlier, you got Lamea, who looked all right as a guard, and then you've got Christian Haynes. And I don't want to give up on him just yet. Put him in a proper scheme where he's more likely to thrive than BS that we just saw last season. And then you've got Jalen Sundell at center. I mean, and he's got the versatility, I think, to be more than just a center. I mean, he was a tackle in college, wasn't he? Yep. So, I mean, that's kind of like Gray Zabel's thing over in North Dakota State. Yeah, he's a tackle listed, but he can be a guard or a center. So I think the versatility of tackle guard or guard center is going to be highly coveted by Seattle. But I don't see them having to just throw too much money in volume. Or there you go. Nick just said combined. That part I can see as more feasible. So like 1 free agent signing, 2 draft picks, or 2 free agent signings, 1 draft pick of who's ready to start, and then maybe like an extra 1 in day 3. I think that is completely reasonable. But it's pretty much all got to be on the interior, and at least one guy who is like a Donovan Jackson, somebody who in a pinch is capable of playing tackle. I'm still very high on Donovan Jackson as a good fit for Seattle. And failing that, if they go get a center in the draft, I didn't mention him earlier, but Jared Wilson from Georgia was another combine standout. And then at guard, Tate Ratledge is another one who I think would be very much on Seattle's radar. And he did meet with them. So we'll see about the 30 visits too, because that is not an ironclad thing, but historically, if you're on the 30 visit list, at least 1 or 2 of those guys is going to end up being drafted or at least signed as a UDFA by the Seahawks.
Agreed.
Yeah, guys, that was a lot. We covered a lot, man. This flew by. Pulse of the Hawks, guys. Appreciate everybody throwing in their comments and questions. Like, yeah, we covered a lot of stuff. But coming around the next time, I guess our next segment, Mookie, we are going to be
in free agency. So. Man, I mean, you want to talk about, I mean, hopefully, there might be an emergency pod here that we might have to call you back on here, because I don't know. I don't want it to be for DK Metcalf. So, but it could be the Geno Smith situation. So let's see, man. But a lot of cool stuff. This is a great time of the year, man. Just so much going on, so much to talk about. Guys, real quick, any closing thoughts before we get out of here? Excited to see what comes up in the next couple of days here and coming weeks, because it'll give us a better idea of where they're going to be looking in the draft, I think.
I just hope that we don't have to just sit out the first week of free agency like we usually do. I mean, I want some excitement that week. This week is actually going to be probably more exciting for us in terms of news than the following week, because we got so many extensions and cap casualties to deal with. But be players in free agency the first week without having to go break the bank.
Yeah, absolutely. Bryce, I think you might need to check your pulse there, man.
Trust me, man. This fluid thing that I've been dealing with.
Yeah,
man, this fluid cold thing I've been dealing with has just been kicking the crap out of me and my household here. Like,
for sure. Yeah, I just
the energy level is a roller coaster currently, and now I'm on that low part of it. So.
No, for sure. I just brought it up because I let everyone know. Yeah, Bryce is coming off a pretty bad flu, so he's with it. Guys, appreciate you coming on, Bryce. Like, I know you're fighting it, so it's awesome stuff. Mookie, awesome having you on again. Guys, go check us out too. We're part of the FieldGulls team, and so you're going to see our podcast over there every time there's a pod. It's going over there too. So make sure you go to FieldGulls.com, because that's where you find us, and a bunch of other great content. Mookie, appreciate it again. Guys, also go down, sub to the channel, Hawks Zone Rundown, and we are going to see you guys on the next one. Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.